Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Gina Panayiotou has joined me in the studio today. Gina, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Andrew. I'm super excited to be here. Love your podcast. I think it brings so much value to the leadership arena. So very excited about our chat today.
Yeah, so am I. And what I love about this show is every single story is unique. I'm looking forward to hearing yours today. So for the audience that don't know you, please tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a maritime lawyer by background who kind of transitioned into ESG and sustainability strategies along the way. So I work more on the social impact space at the moment. I run my own consultancy called Oceans Arena. I've been in maritime actually for 12 years. I've been working for 15, but I guess once I joined the maritime world, there was really no turning back. It was love at first sight. Now I work with different stakeholders through Oceans Arena, from the International Maritime Organization to ship owners to startups, you name it, to kind of help them build a sustainable future. So I also sit on the board of an association called WISTA, which is for empowering women in the shipping industry, working towards gender equality. So that's more or less in a nutshell what I do.
Super. And what about when you're not working professionally? What is it that you do to recharge, just to make sure that you can serve those that you're working with?
I think it really depends on the period in my life and the stage. I do different things. But one of the things that has been pretty consistent, so I enjoy writing quite a bit. So I would say that's one of the key activities. And then just spending meaningful time with some close friends or walks in the park and stuff like that. I just really, connecting with yourself, anything that really helps you detach and connect with yourself.
It's right.
I write about different things. Like it could be anything from poems or moments that I see around me, or what else have I written about? Just experiences, I guess, and how I translate them, or learnings and outcomes, which is probably a bit relevant to the discussion today. Yeah.
Good. And I think everyone's got a book in them, haven't they? So I look forward to reading yours when it comes out. I think for the audience, I've written a book which, in 2021, which was quite a difficult exercise for me. But when you're writing, do you need to create the right environment for yourself, or can you just write anywhere?
I think it's a bit of both. Sometimes, when you're in flow, you can pretty much write anywhere that, if this creativity comes to you. And I've tried to work on that and build that more, because I always felt you had to fix the environment and have a specific time and schedule. But I found that sometimes when ideas come to you, it's best to just jot them down and work from there. But other times, having said that, you do need a bit more structure and a place that you feel, very comfortable and safe in to express more or go deeper into things.
Super. Well, we know that you're in maritime now. Let's understand a bit more about where life started for you. Take us back to your childhood and how that shaped your early leadership experiences.
Yeah, so my childhood was quite interesting. I was originally born in the UK, actually, and we kind of relocated to Cyprus when I was 4. My dad traveled a lot for work. I guess, it was more or less me, my mom, and my brother growing up. I think naturally, because you asked how this relates to shaping who you are and your leadership style. In family dynamics, we're always assigned a role in a way, I think, from an early age, and we kind of carry it with us probably forever, but a few lucky ones do work on from that onwards and evolving into something more authentic. So I guess mine was more of like kind of being the good one who didn't really create a lot of trouble, was quite self-sufficient, relied a lot, I guess, on myself and not disappointing anybody, seeking a lot of probably external validation. And those were kind of traits that I definitely brought into shaped me as an early leader, I guess, because you learn to work in those dynamics. And I think that's what you kind of carry with you going forward. And then on early experiences, which I would differentiate a bit, because I feel also your early experiences are who leads you. That's a big shape. That's a big thing in how you're shaped and become as a leader. And early on, I'll say now I was quite blessed to come across people who made me see the leader I didn't want to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite helpful, I think, in also working on what I had from my childhood experiences, reshaping that and taking it forward into who I didn't want to be. So yeah, I think that's how my early childhood and early experiences shaped my initial leadership style.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll come to a bit more detail in terms of that support you had in that, because not everyone gets that, as early as in life as you have done in that sense. So just talk a little bit about the first time you can remember in your childhood when you maybe had a dream about what you wanted your life to be like.
I'm not sure whether it was what I wanted my life to be like. I knew that I always wanted to create change. Like from a very early kid, I was very passionate of anything that I could positively influence and change. So that and it stays with me. I mean, even now in the sustainability space, it's so important in everything that I do as a leader and beyond. But I think very, very early on, and this, yeah, is probably an indicator of that. I was around 12 and I somehow decided that I wanted to become a lawyer, and there's nobody in the family who is a lawyer. So it came as something very strange, to be fair, to those around me and my family. And I think that was probably coming from a very unfair situation that I had seen from how my mum had been treated from a lawyer who was her client at the time. And I think because he kind of abused that power, it made me feel that if I wanted to have, I guess, that power to use it for good. So yeah, that's very early on. I decided that's what I wanted to be, or who I wanted to be, and what I wanted to do.
And at that point, obviously, we never know, do we, what that takes to get there in that sense. So we'll come to that and some of the challenges that you
Yeah.
face. But one of the things I'm always interested in, particularly in the family dynamic that you were in, where obviously you were being self-sufficient and obviously your mother was mainly around in that sense. What other role models were around for you at that point? There were no lawyers, but for you, who else did you look up to and be able to model yourself on?
From very early childhood, obviously, without doubt, my mom was surely a very big role model for me, because she was also around, of course, most of the time. So she taught me a lot around strength, and that kind of shaped how I also wanted to be in my life, being quite strong in certain situations. But even though from my dad, despite the fact that he traveled quite a bit, he did teach me a lot of resilience. So he was definitely a really good phenomenal role model on that. Then from there on, I think it was more the people that I interacted with at school, like some of my teachers who very early on saw qualities in me and kind of made sure that I was aware of them and helped and supported me in shaping them. And then when I did started working, alongside the bad experiences that I had, I also had people who were phenomenal role models, especially in the shipping industry. I'm very grateful because, as you know, it's quite male dominated. So while I did have men who have been phenomenal allies, it was also really important to see women who had, gone down this path. And I did have some very strong women in my network who really influenced me in how I evolved and stayed in the industry, to be honest.
I know that you're involved in doing that yourself now. We'll come on to that later in terms of you giving back to the industry as well. So let's move on. Thank you for sharing that in terms of you decided you wanted to be a lawyer. You obviously were in the family environment you described. So just talk us about that pivotal point as you were becoming an adult at that point and what that was like for you with the challenges that lay ahead in terms of becoming a lawyer.
In terms of becoming a lawyer, I think obviously coming from from a family where there wasn't another lawyer in the family, so it was a very new pathway. So yeah, I think one of the big challenges of trying to become a lawyer when there's nobody in the family is that you're starting, it's a completely new environment for you. So you need to come, understand the dynamics, understand not just studying it, but then how from there, how are you going to enter into this profession and grow and develop? So that was quite new for me, but I think it did give me a lot in respect to that. I had to put in that extra effort to understand, to meet people, to learn from them, to really strive by myself to achieve, I guess, whatever I've managed to achieve in the process. So I think that built my resilience hugely. And from there, it kind of made me believe, if I could do this and achieve this, then I can probably achieve anything, I guess. In the background, it helped build your confidence knowing that this was something really challenging. Also, coming from Cyprus, and I would say this is a global thing, but especially from Cyprus, usually people who go and do law are people who do have a family history in it, and usually over generations, right? So that made it even more challenging psychologically because the people I was kind of studying with had all this extra knowledge, I guess, an extra network. So yeah, I think through that process, it kind of made me have more self-confidence in myself that I could achieve anything from there on.
And from what you inherited in your childhood, both nature and nurture you described earlier, how did that serve you in those early years, and maybe what got in the way at that point before you were told how to change to become the leader you didn't want to be?
Yeah. Um, I think how it came up, obviously, in my early phase of leadership. So towards my end of 20s, I'll say late 20s, when I stepped into a leadership role for the first time, I kind of brought those qualities with me, right? So I thought you had to be the person that was very strong, the person who knew everything, not really branch out for help, which makes it impossible when you need to delegate to a team. I mean, that's not realistic. Just appearing, I guess, as this external persona of the leader, of what you think people are expecting for you, not to disappoint them, very overly consumed in not disappointing people, in pleasing people, in guess getting that validation externally. And it was a really draining process. To a certain extent, it was good because on the one hand, obviously, when you're leading, at least showing that you're confident, it's a very important trait. You can't be a leader if you can't make people see that you're confident in the direction you're leading them. But on the other hand, because of everything that came under the surface of what was the confidence, it became very draining and over consuming. All of the time am I going to disappoint somebody if I say something, or if I need to give negative feedback, or if I'm struggling, how do I ask for help? I shouldn't, because this is the position I have to be. So the focus was very much about building this external persona. And I think as I grew on from that, now I'm in my early 30s, and my leadership style, I think, has come a very long way. Because at some point, I think the first time that I had a trainee, so as a lawyer, obviously people came to train under you also. And I was very keen in an attempt to also not be the kind of leaders that I had who wanted to use authority over everything else and showcase power and authority. I wanted to make sure that they felt included. So I was taking her to all important meetings and stuff like that. But I was seeing a withdrawal, I guess, from her side, and some sort of an anxiety. So I had a discussion. I was trying to figure out why. I mean, I tried to involve you in everything. So what is going wrong? And yeah, she said, you know what? I just get so overwhelmed because I see you're so confident and you're handling everything, and I'm never going to be able to be like that. And yeah, I think that moment was was a big realization for me, in realizing that in an attempt to be this external persona, I hadn't really shown who I was about and my own challenges, and shown vulnerability. And truth be told, you can only connect as a leader if people can see a bit behind the surface of who you really are and who you authentically are. So I think taking it from there, I did a lot of moving from building that external persona to connecting with my authentic self and that North Star. And actually, I raised this discussion with a good friend and mentor of mine at the time. And I said, how do you do it? You know, your team absolutely loves you. And she said, it's really about, connecting with who you authentically are as a leader. You can't, present to be something else. It's not sustainable. It's not going to work. She actually recommended a fantastic book. You may know it, called True North
Mhm.
by Bill George. So yeah, I kind of understood, finding your true North Star as a leader, being very authentic, is the only way that people can see you authentically and connect with you authentically and engage. So that's definitely how I've transitioned over the decade or so.
And I think in that book, if I remember, I think it's in the early part of the book, there's an exercise there where to find your true north, that you have to make a list of what drains you, what energizes you. And that in itself is a really useful technique to just work out, what the authentic self is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm a firm believer now of you really should be putting in the effort. The more you know yourself, the better you can show up for your team, for your world, for your family.
Just talk to us a bit, Gina, about that point you referred to before you had the eureka moment about showing the underbelly a little bit in terms of that person you talked about. You were talking about also how it was all consuming as well in terms of trying to keep that external persona going. Just talk to us about how you cope with that and how you manage to access resources to support you.
Well, I won't lie, for a very long time, I wasn't coping. Like, I think it was an internal battle that I hadn't even quite realized how consuming it was. And I had always, always felt that you have to be focused and productive all the time. So it wasn't until a moment where I actually say I used to be a focus addict. But this moment, when I couldn't focus anymore, like I literally, it had come to such a point where subconsciously, I guess, because consciously, I wasn't even aware of how draining and overwhelming this was building up to be. So I couldn't really focus and concentrate. And I think it was again just through discussing it with people, with mentors, I guess, and saying, I don't know what's going on. I've always been able to be super focused and I really don't understand what's happening here. And we kind of break it down and started to see that obviously it was a buildup of quite a few years of doing this and not reaching out for help, not being able to communicate properly with your team or feeling that you have to show up a certain way for a long period of time. I also, I guess, went more into an introverted mode for a while in trying to figure things out because generally I'm quite extroverted. But it took, I think, to cope with it, it took going like putting in the time and effort to understand what was happening and how I was going to go forward. And I think the more I learned how to give myself some time to, I guess, think and daydream and allowed myself to be more at peace and not feel guilty every time I tried to tune off. That's why I mentioned at the beginning, like taking time off to really decompress and tune out. Because from there, I started then seeing that this worked much more better because I came back with more clarity each time or with better ideas or a better solution. So I think that's kind of how I worked out what was going to work for me and how I needed to approach it from there onwards.
What I love about you, what you said there, which I'm sure many leaders listening to this and watching this will relate to, is whenever we put the time in for that personal reflection based around curiosity and acceptance of what is, which is very hard for us to do, suddenly something shifts and things do become clearer. So I'm really glad you've shared that. That's something I see a lot. So just talk to us about then what happened in the sense you were doing that, and I'm guessing that was a repeated practice, so you gained clarity, for you to decide that there may be something else for you in the future around the way that your career would develop. Just talk to us about that point.
Something else in the future, you mean in transitioning
Yeah,
from law or transitioning in a new form of leader?
I think both, whichever is relevant for you first, but I'm interested in both of those.
Yeah, both is probably a better way to approach it because I think they kind of were very intertwined. So I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 12 for the reasons, I obviously discussed, whether that was wrong or right. I loved doing law and what I was doing. But I think there was something always inside me that felt that was not really, there was something missing or not fully, not fulfillment, but rather something was not just 100% there. There was this always this missing part of the puzzle that I felt I wasn't fully aligned and connected with what I was doing. The the more I was working on the sphere, and luckily I was quite heavily involved in the environmental space at the times. Anyway, it was what I cared about and what I was doing. But then I saw, that there were a few things that came together also in the wider ESG umbrella. So like women's empowerment or social impact. As an industry, we have such a huge influence around the world. So, making a social impact. So I think feeling that that part was missing and then starting to see that, okay, here is where I can make the most change. And it comes back to the values and everything as a child that I believed in, that made me feel happy, valuable, and useful and purposeful. So I think that brought everything together. And also as a leader, it shifted me, because I think when you're purely in the legal world, it's a very different approach. You're there, people come to you, they want to solve a problem. And that's obviously something great. And a big part of it also involves communication and negotiations. But I think through the sustainability sphere, it also allows you to work more as a team with whoever you're working with and the client or the stakeholder. And you're all working towards this common goal. And because you're not you won't be an expert at all the things. If I take maritime, for example, and I say this a lot, I'm not an expert on fuel, for example, so I need to sit with the technical department who are going to give me, and engineers who are going to give me the input there. So I think it brings a more collaborative approach, which was much more aligned, and the leader that I kind of then wanted to be, moving from somebody who felt that you had to be self-sufficient and not, you had to know everything and be the person who was, who was in charge, the only person who was in charge. So then that also shifts when you're working in sustainability. You really need to be a team, and your leadership becomes impact leadership. So you're now looking at the wider picture, at the longer run, I guess, involving everybody and making sure you're all on the same team. So it moves from authority to influence for a wider cause.
And what did you personally find challenging about the transition in both of those areas? What was the most difficult thing for you?
The most difficult thing for me was that people probably thought it was a crazy thing to do. I mean, when you study as a lawyer, it's something you've wanted since you were 12, and people expect a more traditional, I guess, trajectory of where you're going as a law firm. So to say, okay, I'm going to leave this kind of trajectory behind and move to something that's much more unpredictable, much more uncertain. It's not clear to everybody what the role and important is. There's a lot of resistance around it. There was even more negativity around what exactly it was. So I think the challenge with myself, it's again letting go of that expectation of what people expect you to be as a lawyer and the path that you're going to follow. The fear, I guess, of who you're if you're disappointing somebody along the way, or like if it doesn't make sense to the rest of the world, should it make sense to you? Or why do you feel this way, or you're driven this way? So I think that's a challenge, because it requires a lot of self-motivation and persistence to be convinced and have that conviction from within that, oh, you know what? This is exactly what I want to do. And that's not an easy thing, because you get challenged all the time. It's not as if you're moving from one safe path to another safe path. You're completely moving into something that pushes you out of your comfort zone, when you could be much more safe just following a very normal route down, a successful route, or what people consider a successful route to be.
And I'm hearing my voice now, Simon Squibb, who's been a guest on the show. Simon at this point would say, nobody's job is safe in corporate anymore. You're as safe setting up your own business and following your true north than you are serving someone else in that sense. So what's really important, I think, Gina, from what you've said there, if you'd not discovered your true north through that reflection and that curiosity and the acceptance that there was something not quite aligned, I think it would have been a lot harder, wouldn't it, to actually live the life that you're living with all of this around you, this noise, because you have your true north and you know actually this is what you're meant to be doing.
Definitely, because I mean, there's a voice in your head, and of course the people around you have much more traditional views, and it's not their fault, because that's also what society tells us is correct. So if you want to go down a new route, you need to be your best cheerleader. And I've said this before in discussions, because everybody else, one way or another, is going to be saying something slightly different, putting doubts in your head, putting fears in your head. And we also learn as humans from a very young age to kind of live by fear rather than by love and passion, which is such a harmful thing, because we spend most of our adult life, and only a few people who are lucky actually realize that, no, you can't live your life in fear and trying to be safe. You need to, make a happy life out of it. We're only here for a short time. So I think, yeah, you definitely have to know and feel that something is wrong. But I think because that's I like being very realistic, and I won't say, oh my God, yeah, I absolutely knew this was the right thing for me. I was convinced. There's always going to be doubts in your own self. But I think where you can really, what keeps you going is the fact that I know, okay, but in that other place where I was I have like, there's a reason that I couldn't stay in that. I always felt unsettled. I always felt there was more. And if you keep that feeling throughout the process, it also eventually leads you into this conviction that, no, this is a better route for me, because I think that's a more easier transition, rather than expecting people to really know exactly with clarity and absolute commitment and conviction that going in a different direction is the right thing. It's more about that other place wasn't exactly where I needed to be. And this was a big discussion also when I relocated from Cyprus to the UK for me.
I love that. And I've got one time for one last question for you, but it's an important one. Bear in mind, this conviction is there now, and we've understood your journey to where you are right now. What is it that you're going to be in service of for the next 5 or 10 years, and how you're going to make sure you make the biggest impact with that?
I think I want to be in service of impact leadership. I want to build up more impact leaders in this world. And this is also organizations as well as individuals, right? Because impact leadership is something I speak about, I preach, I work with people on, because I want people to really be finding that true north, but also what they want to see out of their life, and what they want to be feeling on a day-to-day basis, and what they're delivering. And unfortunately, quite a big amount of people, you probably know this through your own work, know something's quite not right, but they never dare to ask the question, okay, but what could be the right thing for me? So I think that's where I would like to work, both with leaders, but also with companies, in kind of finding what the role is in making an impact in their communities, in the world, in their life.
Super. And if anyone out there has been interested in what you've had to say and wants to collaborate in some way and get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Which hopefully they will. Through my LinkedIn, I guess. So it's Gina Panayiotou, or an email address. They can find it on my website at oceansarena.com. So these would be the best 2 ways, I guess, to reach me.
Super. And one last question, because it's been with me since we started. And thank you for answering it earlier. If there was a piece of fiction that you were going to write in the future when you had time, what kind of theme would it be? What kind of world would it be?
Was a piece of fiction that I would write, what kind of world? Well, this is quite fictional. I think it would be a world where people would really be empowered and very unapologetic about who and what they wanted to be.
And on that note, Gina, I think we'll finish. Thanks very much for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.